विवेकानंद सूरये सच्चित्सुखस्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे. Every week we are discussing a new topic. The topic for today's discussion is compassion is divine. What is God? What is divine? Can be defined through a quality. Is there a quality which symbolizes God to the greatest extent? It is compassion, or non-violence, or love, or in modern parlance, we are using the word empathy. It is all the more important now in the present COVID times, where everybody wants to be considered sympathetically. Everybody is talking about empathy. So the traditional word is, conventional word is compassion. It's also, Mahatma Gandhi preferred to use the word non-violence or universal love. Empathy, compassion, universal love, non-violence. They're all, in a way, synonyms. Why it is important to practice compassion? We have discussed many times. The greatness of human being is that among all the things that perceive this universe, among all the beings that perceive this universe, human being is the highest. Every creature actually is perceiving the universe. An ant also perceives the universe. A dog perceives the universe. A cat perceives the universe. Every animal has got its own perception. In human beings also, different people have got different perceptions. Sure, we don't see the same world. Why the seer is important? Why the seer is more important than the seen? For example, the sun. If you just see the brightness of the sun as a physical object, it is a very intense object. We are nowhere. You can't even stare at the sun for a few minutes. Okay, the object is so intense. It is not our creation for sure. There are so many such things in this physical universe. No doubt the physical universe is grand. But who certifies the sun? Who certifies the existence of the sun? If there were no human beings, who would certify the existence of the sun? No human beings on the planet. The creation exists. So, whether it exists or it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist because the seer is not there. The scene, though very phenomenal and grand, if there is no scene to certify it, the seer to certify it, I see the universe, so it exists. If I am not there, it doesn't exist, right? How can you say, Swamiji, actually, it is there, but we are not there, so we are not seeing? No, the seer is more important than the seen. It is I who certify the existence of the universe. Sans me, there is no universe, right? Universe exists because there is seer. We are seeing the universe and we are saying the universe exists, that's why it exists. If we are not there, the universe is not there. So, from that perspective, the seer is more important than the seen, though, as a physical entity, our human body is nothing compared to the forces in this universe. But we certify the existence of the universe, for that reason it exists. So, we are great in that way. So, among the qualities that will help us to reach our inner nature, our people have said that that's why know thyself. Knowing the universe is not as important as knowing yourself because the seer is more important than the seen. So don't invest your energy studying the scene, the universe, but study yourself, the seer. Who is the seer? I am the seer. We are seeing the universe. Who am I? It's a great question. Try to know yourself, O man. Try to know thyself. Who am I? So focus on that. Once you concentrate yourself on yourself, you turn your mind inward and you will find the nature of your own true existence. Then the distinction between the seer and the seen or the mystery of the universe will be revealed to you. That's what our sages did. The people who had come, who were born here in this Vedic land, before Buddha and after Buddha, all the sages and saints, all the people, all the spiritually illumined people, they all actually say in one voice that know thyself. Knowing yourself is more important than knowing the universe because it is you who certify the universe. Unless you know who you really are, who the seed is really, you won't be able to know the mystery of the universe. We have we have also discussed here. See, we don't see God. The only way that is available to us is to try to know God through the universe. Nobody with his physical eyes see God. We can infer the existence of God because we have not done the universe. So you have to approach the Lord, the creator of the universe, only in and through the creation. There's no option. So among the things that you have to study to know the Lord, human being is the highest because God has created two things, insentient and sentient, lifeless and beings with life. And among beings with life, there are two kinds, movable and immovable. Trees, for example, there is life in that, but they're not movable. So they're not as great as movable creatures. So the sentient things are superior to insentient things. Beings with life are superior to inanimate physical universe. And among the beings that cannot move are inferior to beings that move. And among the beings that move, from ant to human being. So, if at all you have to know God, you have to study this universe, the Creator's creation. To know the Creator, you have to approach the Creator only through the creation. And if you have to study the creation, you have to study the highest in the creation. And we are the highest in the creation. And what it means to study oneself, we don't know. That's the reason actually we don't focus so much on us. Because of Maya, because of Rajas, the nature of the human senses is always to go outward. The eyes look outward. The ears actually wants to hear things from outside. The tongue looks for objects from outside to experience taste, variety of taste. So all the indriyas constantly drag us out. That's why we don't turn inward. What is there inside me? Only flesh and bone, you think. I think, I forgot the name of the Western author. I think is Thoreau, if I remember correctly, who said, the things that are behind you, the things that are in front of you, are not as important as the thing that is within you. There is that profound thing which our rishis call as Atman or consciousness is within you, the source of the universe. So studying yourself is more important than studying the physical universe because it is we who certify the universe. Universe exists only in relation to the seer. If there is no seer, there is no seen. Seen may be grand, but there is no seer to certify it, so it doesn't exist. So who is the seer? I am the seer. So who is the seer? I am the seer. Who am I? That is the profound question. Do you know who you really are? You don't know. So how to know myself? Who am I? I am not the physical body. I have the physical body. I am not the mind. I have a mind. True. They are my possessions, but I am not that. These two. So there is some other dimension to your personality which you need to bring it into your experience and awareness. That is not in your experiences yet. And all the spiritual sadhanas, the methods, techniques that we talk about, all those actually help you to turn inward and to experience your true being. And compassion is one such thing. Compassion is one such thing. If your heart is very soft and very tender and compassionate, you feel the presence of consciousness. You feel the presence of the divine. Why don't we experience the divine that is already staying, dwelling in our own heart? Because our hearts have become barren, if you ask me. We have become a kind of hard-hearted now because of excessive materialism. That the tenderness in our heart actually has been lost to a great extent, particularly for this generation of people. Everybody is struggling. I don't have. Everybody is in want of love. Everybody wants empathy. Not many have the capacity to give it to others. As if we have become uh, bankrupt with regard to compassion. We don't have much in our own account, so we are seeking it from others. You can cultivate it. You can cultivate it. To what extent? Just like Buddha, Vivekananda, or Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. What motivated them to work so tirelessly for the people of the world? They never worked for themselves. It's this compassion. Subhash Chandra Bose describes Vivekananda as he was reckless in his sacrifice, he said. He was reckless in his sacrifice because of that extreme compassion for the suffering mankind. Because his consciousness had expanded, he could identify himself with the whole of life, the whole of the universe, and so he could not sit restfully. He could not sit and relax. He just wanted to elevate everybody to the level of God. So he went on preaching and preaching to such an extent that he made himself a total sacrifice. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa also did the same thing. Though he was bedridden with this throat cancer, till his last breath, he went on talking and talking about God and God. Whoever had approached him, whoever had gone to him. Though doctors advised him not to speak because it was throat cancer. Doctor said, "Well, you should not speak. You're talking too much." First, they diagnosed it as actually clergyman's uh, disease, something. So, throat. Even after he had been diagnosed with cancer, Sri Ramakrishna said, "How is it possible not to talk? People are coming from far off places seeking spiritual guidance." The doctor advised him, he never followed that. This is the advice of doctor. All other instructions he had followed sincerely, but this instruction of doctor that you should not speak much, Sri Ramakrishna never cared to put that into practice. He never cared for his own life. He knew that his days were numbered, so let me exhaust myself, let me work myself to death. If I can give some consolation to one distressed soul, that's a great thing. Vivekananda said, I have fallen in love with man. I may have to be born again. With 39 years of work, he was not so satisfied. In fact, he had given up his body, unable to see the suffering in the world. He was so kind and so compassionate, so tender. One day he was discussing with Sister Nivedita. He was talking about Buddha to Sister Nivedita. And Swamiji was just, trying to place himself in Buddha's shoes, as it were, and trying to experience the scene of Buddha's, the great exit from the palace. Dead of the night, he left without informing his wife. She was just lying on the cot. Buddha waited for a minute. What vexed him? What was his problem? What was his struggle? His struggle was he was making her a sacrifice because he knew how she would suffer. Because he did not inform her. He didn't want to inform her. Without informing wife, he was leaving the palace. He was trying to imagine how much she would suffer for that. And so that was the concern. He did not care for himself. Where I am going, actually, will I be cared for? How I will fare there? It's nothing about himself, about her. But he was sure probably that she would not permit him. She would not give formal permission. Okay, you can go out, you can become a sannyasi. You can search for the truth. So he had to leave without informing her. His problem was what kind of suffering she would undergo. In the last class, we were discussing about Rama. The same thing. Rama actually was thinking about Kaikeyi. Kaikeyi is suffering. It was Kaikeyi who was trying to inflict pain upon Rama. That's what we all understand. By asking Rama to go to the forest for 14 years. But Rama was not affected by that much. He would tell Lakshmana, see, if I delay my going to the forest, our mother Kaikeyi would be in a worry. Why? She would not be sure whether Bharata would be coronated or not. So I have to quickly leave the palace. Then she would be assured, yes, now my son can be coronated because Rama is not there as an obstacle. So I have to leave quickly. He was in a rush to leave the palace. He would tell Lakshmana. So all the arrangements, the eagerness that you are showing to make me get coronated, same eagerness now you show to send me to the forest. Same eagerness now you show to send me to the forest. See, in that situation also, Rama was not thinking about his own comfort. He was thinking about comfort of Kaikeyi. Of extreme empathy, extreme compassion for the suffering of that individual. She was conspiring against him, but he took pity on her. And now she has distress. What kind of distress? She is worried whether my son You'll be coronated or not. That is the worry. So she is in a hurry to send Rama to the forest. And Rama senses that and wants to leave the palace quickly. And he says the same to Lakshmana. So my mother is in worry. So she has this fear. So let me go to the forest as early as possible. The Buddha had that kind of compassion because he was looking into her mind how she would suffer as he is leaving the palace. That's why Swami says to Sister Nivedita, have you not thought about the hearts of great people? How great they are. Great, 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 he says. So never they think for themselves. They think always about others. Their hearts are so tender and they always think about the suffering and misery of others. The last class they were talking about Yudhishthira also, that Yaksha Prasnas. When Yaksha asks him, so why have you sought the life of Nakula? Then Yudhishthira says beautifully there, and he gives a definition for dharma also. Anrushamsyam parodharmaha paramarthachya me matam. Anrushamsyam shikirshami nakulo yaksha jivatu. Anrushamsyam means compassion. Anrushamsya is a Sanskrit word. Anrushamsyam parodharmaha. I consider this as the supreme virtue. The kindness or empathy or compassion is the supreme virtue. Paramarthachya me matam. I also consider it as the supreme possession for a person. The supreme thing to be coveted or to be possessed, to be acquired, is this compassion, this empathy. I consider that quality as the supreme paramartha to be attained. Parodharma and paramartha, both. It is the supreme virtue and also supreme thing to be possessed. If you really want to have some kind of wealth, this is the wealth that you need to long for. The wealth of kindness, the wealth of compassion in your heart. And then sees Anrushamsam Chikirshami Nakulo Yakshachivatu. I desire Anrushamsa, I desire compassion. So let Nakula be alive. Then he goes on saying that Mahabharata beautifully. Dharmasila Sadarajan Iti Mam Manava Viduhu. Dharmasila Sadharajan Iti Mam Manava Vidu Swadharman Nachalishyami Nakulo Yaksha Jivatu. People call me Dharmashila, or king actually is a follower of Dharma, whose character there is Dharma, in whose qualities there is Dharma, an embodiment of Dharma. This is Yudhishthira, Dharmaraja. People call me like that, Dharma Shilaha, Sadarajan, always he is interested in following Dharma. So, Swadharma Nachalishyami. So, this Dharma, I cannot give that up. So, what he considers the highest? Compassion, Anrushamsyam. He followed it. In all through his life, Yudhishthira followed compassion to the greatest extent possible. Why it is important to practice compassion? If your heart is that tender and soft, means God has come and resided in your heart. If you are not kind, if you are not compassionate, does it mean that God is not there in you? It is there, but God is hidden very much. It's dormant. It's true dormant. If you have kindness and compassion, your heart is sprouting. The seed of compassion is sprouting in you means God is actually manifesting in you. And kindle it further and further and see that actually you become extremely compassionate. There comes a stage you will attain enlightenment. You will attain enlightenment for sure. There is one more incident in Swami Vivekananda's life. How compassionate he was, how much of empathy he had. When he was at Belur Mutt, one day actually, dead of the night, suddenly he cried in pain. There was another Swami by name Swami Vijnanananda sleeping in the next room. When he heard the cries of a person from Swamiji's room, actually he heard the cries. How come actually Vivekananda would weep? So he came out and knocked at the door, and Swamiji came out and said, Passion, you have not slept? So his pre-monastic name. You would call him by passion, Peshan. So you have not slept? No. Suddenly I heard the cries. Is it you who cried? He said, yes. See, seeing the suffering of the people and poverty of our country, I could not get sleep. I am praying to our master, Sri Ramakrishna. So alleviate their suffering, reduce their suffering. He was doing the prayer in the dead of the night to Sri Ramakrishna. The man actually who had given so much of wisdom and knowledge, but still actually felt it was not sufficient. He could not dispel the darkness of ignorance. There is a lot of suffering. He felt actually incapable of removing all that suffering. So he turned towards his guru. It's not in my power to alleviate the suffering of these people. Though I have preached a lot, I try to give knowledge to people. So please, Dean, to show thy compassion upon these people and alleviate their suffering. I'm not able to see the misery of our countrymen, particularly. See, just see, if you have that kind of compassion, you can't even sleep because you identify with the suffering of all the people in the world. How would you get sleep? Impossible. It is a kind of torture, in fact, in a way. But if when your heart becomes tender like that, it is possible to identify with others' suffering. And at least you'll pray, Loka samastaha sukhino bhavantu. We say, but the prayer must come from the bottom of the heart. Prayer will come from the bottom of the heart only when you understand the pain of others. For that, you need to put yourself into others' shoes and see and experience their agony. Or at least in this age, if we don't inflict pain or suffering on others, that itself is great. Right? I may not be very kind and compassionate to others, at least I will not inflict any kind of pain through thought, through word, and through action. If you take that pledge and resolve and put that into practice, you will grow spiritually very fast. You will grow spiritually very fast. In Buddha's life, he was a very tender child. Early onwards, people could see the kindness in his heart, and everybody would love him, just as people of Ayodhya loved him, Rama. From very childhood, Buddha also was loved very much by the people in the palace and around. You know the story, the very famous story. He had a cousin by name Devadatta. One day, Buddha was in the garden. He was just on the bank of that stream which flows through the garden, the palace. There were a bevy of swans that was just swimming. He was just enjoying the beauty of those swans. Very white, crystal white, and the sunlight was falling on their wings and getting reflected. It was all so beautiful. Buddha was looking at them very compassionately and admiringly. Suddenly, an arrow which passed his ears and pierced into the body of one of the swans. So he immediately rushed into the stream, stretched out his hands, and took the swan in his hands, came back onto the shore, to the garden, and started nursing the wound. He just tore a piece of cloth from his own upper garment and then nursed the wound of the bird and tied the cloth around its wing. Then here comes this Devadatta, the great man who shot the arrow. He said, I was practicing archery. From a distance, he looked at the swans and shot the arrow. So this swan belongs to me. Buddha said, no, it doesn't belong to you, Gautama, Siddhartha. It belongs to me. So there was a quarrel between the two. And then they go to a guru, preceptor, and ask him actually to consider this swan, pronounce his judgment, to whom actually the swan belongs. Buddha said, "This is he who hurt the swan, and I nursed it tenderly and carefully, so it belongs to me." And Devadatta said, I was practicing archery. I shot, it's my arrow which pierced into the bird, and this bird belongs to me. Then the preceptor, the guru, said, no, this is a life. Life doesn't belong to people who hurt it or who take it away. So this bird belongs to Buddha because he nurtured it, he nursed it, he took care of it. This bird belongs to Buddha. compassion, kindness. From the childhood, he manifested this great quality of kindness. After leaving this Kapilavastu, Buddha used to go across the Gangetic plains to different kingdoms and he would beg his food. One day he happened to be in Rajagruha, the capital of Bimbisara. When Bimbisara came to know that the prince of Kapilavastu, Shakya, was begging in the streets of Rajagruha, he goes to him and offers half of his kingdom. You take half of my kingdom, why are you begging? You are a prince, you must rule a kingdom. Buddha said, I am in search for the truth. I don't need your kingdom. So Bimbisara could not force him further. And then he extracts a promise from Buddha that after his enlightenment, you must come to Rajagruha. You are in search for truth. If you happen to attain to the truth, you must come to my kingdom. So Buddha goes to Rajagruha as per his promise. And Bimbisara asks him actually to give the doctrine, receives him well. He goes and he heard that Buddha is coming to Rajagruha along with all his ministers and subjects. He goes and receives him well. So he had 5 wishes, all those 5 wishes got fulfilled. What were those wishes? Uh, an enlightened person should come into his kingdom and he should live in the company of the enlightened person for some time. An enlightened person should explain the doctrine and he should be able to understand the doctrine. Something like that, 5. I think I could tell only 4. So all his wishes got fulfilled and he should understand the doctrine, he could understand. So Buddha went there. One day he was doing an animal sacrifice. He was sacrificing a few goats because the priests suggested Bimbisara. It was in vogue in those days. Regularly they would do these yajnas and animal sacrifices, the order of the day. So as part of the sacrifice, there were 100 or 108 goats actually. Bimbisara was sacrificing. The priest, the Yajnakarta, asked him, if you sacrifice these 108 goats, you will go to heaven. Generally, right? With the intention of going to heaven only, they would do the sacrifices. The Buddha intervenes because he takes pity on these goats and goes to Bimbisara and says, if by sacrificing a goat, if you can go to heaven, by sacrificing a human being, you will go to higher spheres. So take me a sacrifice and leave these goats. He argues and reasons with Bimbisara. From that day onwards, Bimbisara stops killing animals in the hope of going to heaven. So that was the kindness and compassion of Buddha. All through his life, he had practiced it. Ahimsa Paramodharmaha. In Vivekananda's life, there are other incidents. In Sri Ramakrishna's life also, we have so many incidents. Particularly when he was at Kashipur and Shampapur, during his last days, when he was at Shampapur. So doctors advised him not to speak to anybody, speak only very little. You have to speak sparingly, they said, but he never put that into practice. So devotees would go and pester him for spiritual guidance. He would give them. One day, he told Divine Mother, because constantly talking, very jokingly, he would pray to Divine Mother Kali, he would say, you're all bringing actually second-rate people. 1 seer of milk adulterated with 5 seer of water. See, my bones have gone dry, have become powder. Why? Because I am putting wet fuel into the fire and wet fuel into the fire I am putting and constantly blowing air into the fire. So my bones have become completely powdered doing this constantly. Bring good people to me. According to him, good people means the people who understand the spiritual instruction just by a word, by simple counseling. But the people who are going to him were not able to understand the doctrine that easily. Before that, we studied Bimbisara. Bimbisara, Buddha, when he had explained the doctrine, Bimbisara could get the doctrine, could understand it. And he put it into practice in his life. He became very kind thereafter. It is not just preaching, and people should be able to understand and should be able to put that into practice. So these people are not able to understand what I'm preaching them. And so it takes me a lot of pain to explain them to make them understand. So being good people means people with spiritual samskara, people who have got some dispassion, some seed of vairagya in them, so that my task would become easy. When actually people, Kedar Ramchandra Datta had gone to him, he said, "Today I was praying to Divine Mother. Lord, oh Mother, give a little power to this Kedar, Ramchandra Datta, Girish, and one more Goswami is there. So give them some power. Let all the people go to them first. So they would correct their angularities. They would get some spiritual instruction from these people, and then they come to me for final instruction. For me to do everything, it is so difficult, he said to Divine Mother. So this has become actually a weak drum, and also with holes in it. He was talking about his own body because he did such intense penance, the kind of history of modern India. Really extraordinary. So because of that, his body actually had become very emaciated, worn out completely. And in addition to that, after enlightenment, he had decided to give his spiritual instruction to the people. He would go on with his spiritual ministry to people who go to him in Dakshineshwar. In the beginning, people would go only in small number, but towards 1985, 1885 and end of 1885, the number had gone up so much. And Sri Ramakrishna already told, when more people understand that this is God and come to this place seeking spiritual instruction, that means the days are numbered for this body. That means he would give up the body, die very soon. The days are numbered for me. So when I spend my nights in Calcutta, when more number of people come here and consider this body as God and understand this and come for spiritual instruction, that means thereafter this body would not live for long. But even though he had contracted this cancer, he would give spiritual instruction to everybody. Extreme compassion, highest degree of compassion. When other disciples actually intervene and they say, "Oh, Master, you should not speak like that. They may come, they may come. So, but you don't have to speak so much." He says, "How can that be? They are parched with misery. The suffering of the world is so intense. They come here with great hope and expectation. If I don't give them that hope and expectation, and if I don't fulfill that hope, and if I don't give them the little spiritual instruction, they would go back disappointed." So he would exert himself so much that ultimately consumed him. How could that be possible? Because of compassion. So the compassion is a great virtue that we all need to cultivate it. Compassion and empathy, particularly the COVID times, more people are in need of it. And blessed are those who can be little, kind and compassionate, who have got some empathy in their hearts for others suffering. We are also suffering, everybody is suffering. You may also have suffering. I think it's Plato who said, "Be kind, for whomever you meet is bearing a greater burden." Be kind, he says, Plato. Why it is important to practice compassion? Why should you be kind to others? Because you are carrying a burden for sure. But the person whom you meet with actually, he is carrying a greater burden. Then it becomes possible for us to be kind and compassionate and to show empathy. I have my own burden to carry for sure. But if somebody comes to me, I will give my best. I will try to give some kind of hope, some consolation, so that he will go with some joy and happiness. Jesus also says in Bible, a great statement is that, "Come to me, all you who, oh, who labor and are heavy laden. Who labor and are heavy laden, I will give you rest," he says. Come to me, who labor and who are heavy laden. You are struggling, you are toiling in the world constantly, in the hope of reducing your misery, in the hope of gaining some joy and happiness, but it's not happening. The burden of life has become so heavy. So you come to me. I will give you rest, he says. How I will give you rest, he says. Take my yoke upon you. Take my yoke upon you. For my yoke it is lighter, he says. It's easy to carry. I'm not quoting the exact words. Take my yoke upon you. My yoke is lighter. Why my yoke is lighter? Because he says, I am meek and lowly in spirit. That means he says that I have surrendered myself complete to the will of the divine. So my yoke is lighter, has become lighter. My burden of life has become too light. So follow me, he says. Take my yoke and follow me, and you'll have rest. Your souls will get rest, he says. So my yoke is light means I have surrendered myself completely to the divine, to my heavenly Father. So for all of us also, the burden of life will become lesser and lesser, provided we surrender ourselves completely to the will of the divine. Rama, when he told this to Lakshmana also. The last class we discussed this. He told Kaikeyi, Mother Kaikeyi, she used to love us so much. She would give us as much love as she would give to her own son Bharata. Suddenly she turned like this. She behaves so aggressive. Suddenly she has become aggressive and she behaves like this. What could be the reason? She is an helpless instrument in the hands of the divine. The whole thing is divine play. The whole universe is divine play. If you have this understanding, it becomes very easy for you to bear the burden of life. The burden of life becomes lighter and lighter and lighter. If you don't have this understanding, you will take life very seriously and the burden will become heavy. So that's why Jesus says that I have become low, I have become lowly, and my heart, he had a heart, he has surrendered himself to the divine. So that surrender makes things easy for us. Otherwise, you will feel the burden of life heavy. Everything happens by His will. It is there in all cultures, this surrender, idea of surrender. The whole universe is divine play. It is His universe after all. Our body and mind also belong to Him. So He will carry the burden because He's responsible. He's carrying the responsibility of the whole universe. Why you want yourself, why you want to separate from that will, that is the only the suffering. The suffering is coming because of our own individuality. The suffering is coming because of I and mine. But once you drop this, that everything is divine will, it all belongs to Him. The body, mind also belong to Him. Where is suffering for you? You'll be able to digest all kinds of happenings in your life. Otherwise, the burden of will is very heavy for everybody. So don't take things that seriously. It's all divine play. So kindness or compassion is that great virtue which enables us to realize our real divine being, to realize the truth within us. So it's a supreme virtue. We have the story of Jimuta Vahana, a great story. What kind of people this culture has produced? They're all just symbols, some examples. Jimuta Vahana, he was the Vidyadhara king. His father was Jimuta Ketu. He was ruling a kingdom there, Kanchanapura, in one of the valleys of the Himalayas. So that king, he had no issue, child, for many years. So he had prayed to that Kalpa Vruksha in his own garden. There was this wish fulfilling tree. So whatever the desire, he will go to that desire he has, he will go to that Kalparuksha tree and I'll ask for that and the tree will grant that. He thought he would get the child, but the child actually, for many years he had prayed but nothing happened. So one day he goes to Kalparuksha tree and asks, "Oh mother, please grant me a son." So afterwards this Jimuta Vahana was born. A child, a blessed child. So Jimuta Vahana, after coming to know about the Kalparuksha, the wish fulfilling tree in his own garden, one day after taking his father's permission, goes to the tree and says, "Mother, you have fulfilled all the wishes of my forefathers. Now I have a desire. Kindly fulfill that. There is a lot of suffering, a lot of poverty in the world. So I want to alleviate that suffering of the people caused by poverty. So please make everybody, rich in the sense that please provide wealth to everybody so that their suffering would get assuaged. This is my wish. Then he heard an ethereal voice. The voice said, "You want to lose me? Then I will go away from you. You will not get me again, but I will fulfill your wish. I will fulfill your wish, but you won't get me again." So the Kalparuksha tree gets disappeared from his garden. And but the people became wealthy, but it showered gold everywhere. And so people became wealthy, their suffering actually has been assuaged. But Kalparuksha tree is no more with Jimuta Vahana. And because of this great charitable act of Jimuta Vahana, his name spread far and wide. And fellow Vidyadharas, they became jealous of Jimuta Vahana. And now they thought actually, this is the time to invade his country. Now he is powerless because the Kalparuksha tree is not there, wish fulfilling tree is not there with him anymore. They felt jealous of his fame and jealous of his riches also. So they all arrayed their armies against this Jimuta Vahana. His father, Jimuta Ketu, actually made an army ready to fight the battle with other Vidyadharas. So, but Jimuta Vahana goes to his father and says, "Father, how mean of us if we go for battle and kill people for the sake of this fragile body. For the sake of this fragile body, why should we participate in the battle and kill the people? I know that you have the capacity, we have the capacity to win against the enemy, but it involves bloodshed. It involves slaying of people, it involves killing of people. Can't we avoid that? Because they are coveting the kingdom. Let us give it to them. How much we need? This is what he says. How much we need for our survival? So they give the kingdom to them. Upon his suggestion, son's suggestion, Jimutaketu, the father, agrees, seeing the generosity of his son. He was immensely pleased. "Okay, my son, let us give a kingdom to them. Okay, let them be happy." So they give their kingdom to other Vidyadharas and they come to this Malaya mountain in the south, Western Ghats. And there they were living in the forest. In that forest, Jimuta Vahana befriends the son of one Siddha, Visravasu. The son's name is Mitravasu. This Visravasu has one son and one daughter. Daughter's name is Malayavati. Son is Mitravasu. So this Mitravasu and this Jimuta Vahana, they become very good friends. One day when Jimuta Vahana was going in the forest, there he came across a temple of Divine Mother. There he saw a beautiful woman praying to Devi. So Jimuta Vahana, he saw her and she was praying to Devi there. And afterwards, he saw her and she saw Jimuta Vahana. So after going back, they fell in love with each other. Love at first sight, they say. So Jimuta Vahana goes back and the Malayavati also goes to home. And then she prays to Divine Mother, "I want to marry this man and make me my husband." The next day she comes to the Divine Mother. And Jimuta Vahana also comes with along one of his attendants. And he comes and hides in a bush. And this Malayavati prays to Divine Mother, "If I don't get Jimuta Vahana as my husband, I'll give up my body. Please promise me that you would make Jimuta Vahana my husband." But the Divine Mother did not appear before her. And she threatens her that I will commit suicide now itself. She goes and attempts to commit suicide. She ties one end of her sari to the tree and was about to hang herself to death. Then suddenly she heard a voice. Mother says, Divine Mother, "Oh my child, don't be so rash. Don't take that extreme step. Jimuta Vahana will become your husband and he will also become the king of the Vidyadharas." She said and she disappeared. The voice actually disappeared. So Malayavati became very happy. And meanwhile, one maid comes to Malayavati and says, "Your father has decided to marry you to Jimuta Vahana. Your brother Mitravasu impleaded and he said to his father," Mitravasu goes to his father and says, "This Jimuta Vahana is a gem of a human being and she would be best husband for my sister Malayavati, O father. So it is our responsibility to extend hospitality to him and to marry Mitravas, Malayavati to Jimuta Vahana." So the father also, Visravasu, agrees and then marriage happens. After a few days, one day, Jimuta Vahana and his friend Mitravasu, they were walking in the forest. There they saw a heap of bones. Jimutavahana asked Mitravasu, "What is this heap? How come such a huge heap of bones in this forest?" Then Mitravasu tells the story. You know, this Nagas and this Garuda, they always used to fight. That Kadru and Venata, their mothers actually used to fight, Kadru and Venata. Kadru actually is the mother of Nagas, and Venata is the mother of these birds. The story is a long story in the Mahabharata. So, because of that animosity between the mothers and the children, also this became hostile to each other, the Nagas and this Garuda. So, Garuda would devour the snakes indiscriminately, killing hundreds and hundreds of snakes wantonly. So the king of serpents, Vasuki, one day he goes to Garuda, "You need food, okay? Don't kill us indiscriminately like that. Then our species will become extinct. So please be kind." The contract is he enters into a contract with Garuda. Every day one snake will come and will become your food. So don't kill more than that. So Garuda agrees. On that day, it happened to be the turn of Sankachuda, one snake. And so mother actually is bringing Sankachuda to drop him at that particular place where Garuda would come and eat the snake. So Jimutavana heard the wailings of the mother and says, "Mother, don't worry. Today, in place of your son Sankachuda, I will go and I will become food for Garuda." So the old woman and the Shankachuda, they reluctantly agree, the snakes reluctantly agree. In fact, they have to sacrifice their life for Garuda. Why actually Vidyadhara should sacrifice? But Jimutavahana says that you love life, right? Okay, I don't care for my life. I will give myself as food to Garuda today. So you don't weep. At least give me the opportunity to assuage your grief for one day that I'll consider as a great blessing for myself. So you have helped me in a way by giving me this opportunity to sacrifice myself for your sake. So then he goes and lays himself down on the rock. Garuda comes and lifts him up and then goes to the peak of the Malaya. And as usual, starts eating, picking at the body of this Jimutavahana. So while Garuda was carrying him to the peak of the Malaya mountain, his Chudamani actually, his jewel actually falls down, blood stained. But already blood started dripping from his body, and this jewel got stained with blood and that falls down. And Malayavati happens to see that. She finds that gem and she finds it's my husband. How come that this is with blood? So she became frightened and she rushes to her father in law, weeping and wailing. And Jimutha Ketu, because he's an expert scientist and expert in arts, and then he understands what happens, what is going on there. So Jimutha Ketu, this Malayavati, they rush towards the peak of the Malaya to actually see what is happening there. And in the meantime, he was picking at the body of Jimutavahana, who Garuda, and he was feeling extreme joy, not pain. Jimutavahana was not feeling the pain when Garuda was piercing his beak into the body of the Vidyadhara, Jimutavahana. He was not experiencing pain, but he was experiencing joy. And so they all rushed there and the weeping and wailing. The Garuda was surprised. Every day I would get a snake, but today I think some mistake has happened. Somebody else has come in place of a snake. Who could be this? He was pausing for a moment and then picking at it, pausing for a moment and again picking at it. Okay, that's what actually, why he laid himself there on the rock. So now Jimutha Ketu and Malayavati reaches the peak of the mountain and then they cry and, "Oh Garuda, you are killing Jimutha Vahana, the man who had sacrificed the Kalpavruksha wish-fulfilling tree for the sake of the world." Oh, Garuda realizes his mistake now, but it's too late by then. Jimutha Vahana dies. He passes away. Then Malayavati was uncontrollable. She was disconsolate, weeping and weeping. "Oh mother, oh divine mother, you said that Jimutavahana would become my husband and he would become the king of Vidyadharas. Now he has passed away. How come that your word actually is not becoming true?" And then the divine mother appears before her and sprinkles little nectar on Jimutavahana. Jimutavahana comes back to life. And Garuda, now he is feeling a bit repentant. He felt remorse. And because he almost killed Jimutavahana, killed practically. And then Jimutavahana said, I will confer a boon on you. You just seek whatever the boon you want. And Jimutavahana says, from today onwards, you should not kill snakes. And also, you should bring back all those snakes who you have already killed to life. Then Garuda agrees and he brings Amrita, sprinkles on the heap of bones and brings back all the snakes to life. This is the story. Jimutavahana is so kind and compassionate, and ultimately he becomes the king of Vidyadhara again. So we have so many such examples. Today we read them as mere stories. They might have dramatized a bit the story, but there existed a person who had sacrificed himself, who had the gumption and guts to sacrifice himself to that extent. You might ask how that would be possible. Is it possible for ordinary human being? It would be possible for people who have got that compassion in their heart. Somebody who has too much of compassion in their heart, no sacrifice they will find is too much. In our own times, people have done it. Historical person, Jesus had done it. Swami Vivekananda did it almost. Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. The Dichi, we have Puranic examples, many are there. Siddhi Chakravarti. They were all ready to sacrifice their lives because they knew that life comes and goes. Today you're born, tomorrow you die, anyway death is certain. If you get an opportunity to die for a great cause, you get an opportunity to help others. Giving up the body is also not such a great thing. Again, we'll be reborn, right? But today we don't have that faith. We are not sure of, whether we'll be born again or not. So this is the only life I have. So let me preserve it as much as I can till the last breath, till the 80s. So we stretch the life, stretch it. Okay. But their understanding of life was very, very, superior in the sense that they had that far sight. Dharma alone, actually, they would consider as important. Nothing else was important for them. And so, no sacrifice is too high to attain mukti. Giving up one body is nothing. And of course, all that sacrifice they could do because of the compassion only. Indra goes and asks Dadichi, Sage Dadichi, we want your bones. We want to make a weapon out of your bones. Rudrasura, we are not able to bear this Rakshasa. So we have been told that actually, if you an ornament, so a weapon is made out of your bones. With that weapon, you will be able to kill Rudrasura. So Dadichi gladly agrees. Oh, take, fine. Asking bones means asking life. Jnani just sits in meditation and goes into samadhi and gives up the body. And with that bone of Dadichi, this Vajrayudha, Indra actually. Okay. Vajrayudha is, in fact, the bone of Dadichi. And with that, the Vajrayudha only kills Rudrasura. So, compassion is the greatest virtue that you need to cultivate. Many Western scholars and savants also extol this virtue. You all heard about Leonardo da Vinci, you know, the Italian sculptor, mathematician, artist, poet, engineer, multifaceted genius. The airport in Rome is Leonardo da Vinci Airport. I think 16th, 17th century, man. So, if my memory serves me well, extremely compassionate man, very graceful soul. What he would do, he would go into the market. He was a rich man. He would go into the market, and there he would find these fowlers selling birds in cages. People would purchase those birds, they will kill and eat. So, because these are all fowlers, for them it's a source of livelihood. They would go into the forest and catch birds and will sell in the market. People will purchase those who have money and eat. They kill the birds and eat. This Leonardo da Vinci will purchase all those birds in cages and he will liberate them. He will take home and he will let them free. He was so kind and so compassionate, such a graceful soul, multifaceted, so many dimensions to his personality. So, kindness is the need of the hour. We ought to become a little more kind. Because of this materialism, our hearts have become very barren. There is no the tenderness and there is no softness. We are losing it very fast. We should not. That means actually we are putting one more cover on the divine that is dwelling in our own heart. The more kind, the more compassionate you become, the more actually you are manifesting your divine nature. The Yudhishthira says, Anushamsyam Parodharmaha, a great virtue. When we say in the Mahabharata that Ahimsa Paramodharmaha, that means it's compassion. Everybody is in need of that. It acts as a balm on people. If you talk softly, gently, kindly, and we extend a kind gesture, we may not be able to help people, materially all the time. At least a kind word. I'm there with you. Okay, I'll help you. I'll pray for you. You can say. The Swami Vivekananda himself prayed. The man who did that much of work was not satisfied with his work, and he wept and prayed to the Divine Mother and asked his master also to pray for the suffering mankind. We can invoke the blessings of other people, but your blessings and your invocation will definitely work because that is an unselfish prayer. But only thing is, you need to be touched by other suffering. If suffering comes to us, we feel bad, we feel pain. But if suffering comes to others, we're indifferent. You can't be. Others' suffering must become your suffering. Yeah, how much I can help Swamiji? I myself is suffering. I understand. I have my own problems. I have my own burden. Fine. You can invoke the blessings of the Lord. So when you say this prayer, Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu, try to put your soul there. It must be a heartful prayer. Because today there is a lot of suffering. The whole world is full of suffering. Unimaginable. So it's very important. If we all would raise our hearts in prayer, in kindness and in compassion, and definitely I think the pain will go away in no time. Because we are all practically feels helpless now. The whole world feels helpless. The solution it doesn't lie with any human being. So it is time that we invoke the blessings of the Lord upon everyone. Be a prayerful individual. So you are all devotees. You are all devotees of the Lord. There are a good number of people who are atheists who don't believe in God. They think nothing works, nothing happens with that. We are not of that kind, right? At least now, actually, we feel helplessness. So scientists are struggling to invent a vaccine for this coronavirus also. You pray to the divine that their effort might be fructified. They are doing their best. But if the divine will is added to that, if the divine showers his compassion upon them and grants that their effort be fulfilled, come to fruition, then I think it will happen quickly. So we are trying with the best, with our own ability and our own intellect, our own intelligence, but things are not happening. We all know that. So, but the cosmic intelligence, the supreme intelligence knows how to run the universe, what should happen at what time. We don't have any key, but He, the creator of the universe, has the key. He knows what to do, when, and how to do. So we can infer that much, right? So when you pray to that intelligence and that power. So be sincere in your prayer. So you have done great help to the society and also to yourself. Only thing is, little feeling is needed. Heart need to become little soft. That's all. So we shall stop here for today. सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामया सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्